The lights don't flicker when the grid dies. That's the first lie most people believe. There is no warning pulse, no cinematic dimming. 1 second, the system is alive, power flowing through transmission lines, substations balancing load, data centers humming in synchronized precision, and the next, everything stops. Elevators freeze between floors. Traffic signals go dark. Cellular towers begin their silent countdown to failure. In less than 60 seconds, the illusion of normal collapses into a cascading systems failure that most urban populations are neither trained for nor psychologically prepared to survive. This is not speculation. It is a predictable outcome derived from how modern infrastructure is engineered, tightly coupled, efficiency optimized, and catastrophically vulnerable to disruption. When a blackout reaches full grid down status, it is no longer a power outage. It becomes a systemic failure event. Urban environments depend on continuous electricity not just for lighting, but for water distribution, sanitation, communication, financial systems, and supply chain logistics. Without power, pumps stop pushing water into elevated storage. Pressure in municipal systems begins to drop within hours. In high-rise buildings, gravity-fed reserves deplete quickly, leaving entire vertical communities without access to water. Simultaneously, wastewater systems lose capacity, creating sanitation risks that escalate exponentially in dense populations. Refrigeration fails, accelerating food spoilage and increasing the probability of foodborne illness within 24 to 48 hours. These are not secondary effects. They are primary collapse triggers. The critical mistake most people make is assuming that restoration is rapid. In reality, large-scale grid failures are complex to recover from due to synchronization requirements. Power plants cannot simply be turned back on in isolation. They must match frequency, voltage, and phase across a network that no longer exists in stable form. This process, known as black start capability, is limited and slow. If multiple nodes fail simultaneously, recovery timelines extend from hours to days, and in worst-case scenarios, weeks. During this window, urban populations transition from convenience-dependent living to survival conditions without the buffer of preparation. Water becomes the first true currency of survival. Not bottled water stored in panic, but the ability to source, purify, and ration it. Most urban residents underestimate how quickly dehydration becomes a critical threat. The human body requires a minimum intake to maintain cognitive function and physical performance, both of which are essential in crisis navigation. However, raw water sources within cities, such as rooftop tanks, decorative fountains, or even residual pipewater, are biologically unsafe. Without purification, they introduce pathogens that can incapacitate individuals faster than dehydration itself. The overlooked principle here is not just access to water, but access to safe water, which requires understanding filtration, chemical treatment, or thermal purification under constrained conditions. Communication collapse follows closely behind. Cellular networks rely on backup power systems that typically last between 4 to 8 hours under full load. As batteries drain and fuel for generators becomes unavailable due to supply chain disruption, towers begin to fail in clusters. The result is not an immediate total blackout of communication, but a fragmented, unreliable network that degrades unpredictably. This creates a false sense of connectivity, delaying critical decision-making. Individuals wait for updates, instructions, or reassurance that never arrives. In reality, the most resilient communication methods during grid-down scenarios are decentralized and low-power, battery-operated radios, pre-established rendezvous points, and analog signaling methods. These are rarely prioritized in modern preparedness, yet they consistently outperform digital systems in prolonged outages.
Food security is the next layer of collapse, but not in the way most expect. The issue is not immediate starvation, but distribution failure. Urban areas operate on just-in-time logistics, meaning grocery stores hold only a few days' worth of inventory. Without continuous restocking enabled by fuel, transportation, and digital coordination, shelves empty rapidly. The psychological response to scarcity accelerates this process, leading to panic buying and hoarding behaviors within the first 24 hours. After that point, access to calories becomes inconsistent and competitive. However, the deeper risk is nutritional imbalance. Consuming high-calorie but low-nutrient food under stress conditions weakens immune response and cognitive clarity, both of which are essential for survival decision-making. The urban environment itself transforms under blackout conditions. During normal operations, cities are structured systems designed for efficiency and flow. Without power, they become obstacle-dense terrains with new hazard profiles. Stairwells replace elevators, increasing physical strain and limiting mobility for vulnerable populations. Street lighting disappears, altering visibility and increasing accident risk during nighttime movement. Electronic access systems fail, locking or unlocking spaces unpredictably. Fuel stations cease operation, immobilizing vehicles and constraining evacuation options. Navigation becomes more complex as digital tools like GPS degrade due to device battery limitations and network dependency. One of the most underestimated factors in a grid-down scenario is thermal regulation. Buildings in urban areas are designed with the assumption of climate control systems. Without heating or cooling, indoor environments can become as dangerous as outdoor conditions, depending on the season. In extreme heat, lack of ventilation and air circulation can lead to rapid onset of heat exhaustion or heat stroke, particularly in upper floors where temperatures rise faster. In cold conditions, indoor temperatures can drop to levels that induce hypothermia, especially when combined with inadequate insulation and lack of appropriate clothing or bedding. The ability to manage body temperature becomes a survival priority that many overlook until it is too late. Energy, in its smallest forms, becomes disproportionately valuable. Not grid-scale electricity, but micro-energy sources, batteries, solar chargers, hand-crank generators. These enable critical functions such as lighting, communication, and medical device operation. However, the key principle is energy efficiency. Devices must be used strategically, not continuously. Every watt-hour conserved extends operational capability. This requires a shift in mindset from abundance to rationing, where energy is allocated based on survival priority rather than convenience. Medical risk escalates silently. Hospitals operate on backup generators, but these are finite systems dependent on fuel logistics that may not be sustainable during widespread outages. As capacity becomes strained, non-critical care is reduced, and access becomes limited. For individuals with chronic conditions requiring regular medication or equipment, this creates a high-risk scenario. The overlooked principle here is continuity of care. Having access to necessary medications, understanding dosage management, and knowing how to respond to medical issues without immediate professional support becomes essential. The final layer, and perhaps the most complex, is human behavior under stress. In the absence of reliable information and stable systems, decision-making shifts from rational to reactive. Cognitive load increases as individuals process uncertainty, risk, and resource scarcity simultaneously. This leads to errors in judgment, delayed action, and vulnerability to misinformation. The most effective survival strategies are not just physical preparations, but cognitive frameworks that prioritize clarity, adaptability, and disciplined response. This is the point where most urban residents realize that survival is not about a single action, but a sequence of decisions made under pressure, with limited resources and incomplete information. The blueprint for survival is not hidden in secrecy, but in understanding how systems fail and how to operate independently when they do. The blackout is not the event. It is the trigger. What follows is determined entirely by preparation, knowledge, and the ability to act before the window closes.